Imagine having a sip of a crisp and cold glass of apple juice in the burning summer heat. Refreshing would be an understatement. There's nothing quite like that freshness and fruitiness poured in a glass. From breakfast tables to lunch boxes, this sweet fruit is a worldwide staple. But what does it take to get this honey-colored goodness on your grocery store shelves all year around? All we can tell you is that it's far more complex than you might think. From apple groves right into your glass. Today at Whole Process, we're uncovering the tumbling journey of apples into the amber-colored nectar you've come to love. With its irresistible taste and powerful nutrition, it's no wonder the apple ranks among the most widely grown fruits in the world. In fact, you've probably also heard the phrase, "An apple a day keeps the doctor away." Well, turns out it's not far from the truth, because the appeal of apples doesn't just lie in their taste. Apples are rich in vitamin C, dietary fiber, and polyphenols, which are plant compounds that have been linked with anti-inflammatory benefits. In fact, consuming apples can lead to a reduction in chronic heart issues and even improve digestion. Medicine disguised as a sweet treat. But the story of this fruit stretches back thousands of years. From wild ancestors in Central Asia to the modern varieties in your grocery store, the apple has traveled a fascinating path. Did you know the apple's ancestors were small, sour, and far from the sweet fruits we enjoy today? It's not an exaggeration. They were first cultivated in Central Asia from Malus sieversii, which is the modern-day apple's cousin in question. From here, they spread along trade routes into Europe and beyond. Today, they thrive all over the world due to advanced agricultural practices, each type producing unique varieties, prized for their flavor, texture, and storage life. However, turning wild apples into the perfect sweet treats didn't happen overnight. Thanks to their complex genetics, farmers had to experiment for generations to create the apples we now savor, even having to plant hundreds of trees just to get the perfect trait in one single apple tree. From there on, the prize tree would get its seeds replanted or even grafted. The apple varieties created through the years are huge. Ranging from Granny Smith to Fuji, there's truly no limit to the choices. With hundreds of apple varieties available, each with its own flavor and texture, the art of making juice is all about balance. No single apple is perfect alone, and producers blend varieties to create that familiar, crisp flavor we know and love. Using varieties like Gala, Roma, and Fuji for optimal sweetness. Although when it comes to the traditional apple juice flavor that most people are used to, the culprits are Macintosh apples. So what does it take to turn this ancient fruit into the golden, refreshing drink that fills our glasses all year round? It all starts with the apple tree. Harvest times for apples are crucial and mainly consistent. But there is an exception for the apples New Zealand produces, which are actually harvested in May. However, most apples are picked around early September and reach prime ripeness around late October. Once the apples are ready for harvest, the real challenge begins, getting them from tree to factory without losing their quality. From traditional handpicking to high-tech drones, farmers have found innovative ways to meet growing demand. Historically, this process has commonly been done by hand, which is a tedious process, but certifies that only the best quality apples leave the orchard. However, since the demand for the fruits has been increasing every year, most farmers have noticed the longer time taken by manual labor. Instead, they have come up with alternatives, ones you won't be able to believe. Farms in New Zealand are now using drones for picking apples. Yes, modern farms have taken harvesting very seriously. Drones equipped with sensors and cameras can measure an apple's firmness and pluck it using gentle suction. While impressive, these flying helpers are still a rarity compared to the more common tree-shaking machines. These machines clamp onto the tree trunks and shake vigorously, sending ripe apples tumbling into collection bins below. Quick and efficient, this method gets the job done fast, but not without consequences. The apples often take a major beating in the process, and leaves come along for the ride, creating a leafy mix that no one wants in their juice. Luckily, these issues are easily fixed. Leaves are removed either by hand or with machines, and any bruised or damaged apples are carefully picked out to protect the overall harvest. But how do farmers decide which apples are ready for storage and distribution? The answer depends on a combination of technology and careful inspection. Some farms send apples along conveyor belts to spot deformities, while others use refractometers to check ripeness. Even with all these tools, the most reliable method remains the human eye. Manual inspection may take longer, but it guarantees the best quality apples make it to market. This is important if the end goal currently is to move them to storage units rather than to juicing factories. Do you wonder how apples are found year-round? We sure did, and the answer is interesting. Specially controlled storage facilities that hold on to them until needed. But it's a hectic process to ensure none are spoiled. Did you know that a single bruised apple can spoil all of its neighbors in storage? Yes, it can. And since these fruits may need to be confined for months, removing any bruised apples is necessary. After all, the demand for apples never takes a break, even when these fresh little guys are out of season. However, there are the apples that don't go into the apple prison. These are our story's stars. After the collection process, these apples are swiftly loaded up into trucks and transported to their new temporary home, the factory. Here, they get tossed onto conveyor belts for the beginning of another thorough inspection process. It's like a beauty pageant for apples, since any rotten apples are booted. The ones that make the cut are dumped into channels with water, which effectively rinses and removes any obvious dirt and debris from the fruit. Thankfully, because no one likes muddy juice. But that's not all. They still have more auditions to do. They get sorted into tier lists. The apples that don't pass this quality check are used for other purposes like fruit compote and more, with only the best being picked for use to ensure you get the most fresh-tasting juice possible. After the highest quality apples are determined, they are thrown in for a second pressure wash, which might sound overkill. But trust us, it's necessary to remove any leftover surface contaminants. In smaller production areas, this washing process can also be aided by hand, but it's not common. When done, these squeaky clean guys are sent off to be temporarily stored in silos until the actual fun begins. But why are they stored? Simply to maintain the flavor and quality of the apples, so they do not deteriorate. When the juicing process starts to begin, the apples are transported to the quality assurance area once again to sanitize their skins with disinfectants. This is because after the apples were harvested, they have come in contact with dirt, debris, and even transferred from multiple hands. But if you're concerned about disinfectant solutions in your food, don't worry. The apples are rinsed right afterwards with clean water to ensure no residue is left on them, and they are safe to consume. But how do factories squeeze out every last bit of juice from these apples? It starts when the newly cleaned apples are transported to the shredding station, where they're given a makeover with blades. These blades act like industrial-grade blenders and cut the apples into smaller pieces, or depending on the machinery, outright crush them to form a paste-like concoction. Once this sweet, mushy mixture is created, a secret ingredient is added, allowing the paste to produce more juice. The secret ingredient in question is called pectinase, an enzyme. But how does it lead to more juice extraction? Well, it breaks down the walls of the apple cells, letting them release juice more freely. This puree is then sent to sit in maceration tanks for anywhere from 1 to 2 hours. This helps enhance the flavor in the puree and the final juice. This puree now takes a trip to the hydraulic presses, where the juice is squished out from the pulp through multiple sieves. The sieves help to catch any pieces of large pulp and make sure all you get is the liquid itself. There is still a catch though. The juice left behind is still cloudy due to the suspension of solid particles in the mixture, and depending on the manufacturer, clearer juice may be preferred. But what about you? Do you prefer your apple juice clear or cloudy? Let us know in the comments. Due to this, the apple juice goes through a clarification process which has multiple steps. The most common is the use of an enzyme like pectin methyl esterase, which helps to break down pectin, the real culprit behind the cloudiness. allowing the particles to precipitate out of the juice. This is followed by ultrafiltration through superfine membranes, which retain the larger particles while letting the juice pass through. Now all that's left to do is pasteurize. Did you know that over 1,700 North Americans have fallen sick over the course of 20 years? All because of the lack of pasteurization in the fruit juices they consumed. So this part is crucial in making sure every sip you take is safe and healthy. The process involves heating to anywhere from 71 to 85 degrees Celsius for a very short duration of a few seconds. This heat treatment eliminates bacteria, which are naturally present in the juice. From here onwards, the juice is tasted for quality and flavor control. Once it passes the inspection, some enhancements are made to increase the taste profile, like the addition of sugars and acids to sweeten and add more tangy notes in the final product. But there's an even more important step at this stage that determines the juice's future shelf life and stability: the addition of preservatives to make sure it doesn't go bad. Finally, juice boxes and bottles are filled and packaged to be sent to stores nationwide. And here it is, a long journey from the sun-soaked orchard to the final bottle, ready to ship to your nearest grocery store. The next time you pour yourself a glass, take a moment to appreciate the care, science, and history packed into every drop. Thanks for watching Whole Process. See you next time. Imagine the hot summer sun beating down your back as you move forward to take a long, fulfilling sip of a cold glass of apple cider. There's nothing quite like that burst of fresh fruit flavor intertwined with soft and tangy tart notes on your tongue. But did you know that the apples that create this fizzy drink take a tumultuous journey from seedling to your glass? Today, at Whole Process, we're going behind the scenes to peer at how one of the most popular European and American delights is made. Cider isn't some new drink either. It's actually one of the oldest fruit drinks. Yes, as hard as it is to believe, it's true. Apple cider has one of the oldest legacies of any fruit drink. The first written record of apple cider dates back to around 55 BCE, when Julius Caesar's legions encountered the Celts in Britain, drinking a strange fermented drink. Naturally, from here the popularity of cider spread throughout Roman Europe. By the Middle Ages, it had become sort of a staple drink in France, Spain, and England. Cider wasn't necessarily considered a treat like we think of it today. It was more on the nutritional side of things, considered healthy, especially since, at the time, clean drinking water was unreliable, so people relied on fermented drinks. Eventually, when European settlers arrived in current-day America, the cider-making industry took bud and bloomed. By the 1700s, cider was the most popular drink in the colonies and consumed with most meals. But what is apple cider in its essence? In the US, cider usually refers to non-alcoholic beverages that have been pressed. However, this definition takes a swift U-turn in Europe. Cider usually refers to the fermented alcoholic version of the drink, so we can imagine mixing them up can have dire consequences. We, however, are not going to make any exceptions and will be breaking down both the sweet and hard ciders. The journey buds as a flower on the apple tree. Harvest season begins in late summer through fall, which is around the months of August till October in the Northern Hemisphere. Apples are collected once their starches have broken down into sugars, and many cider makers even prefer fruit that is slightly overripe to achieve the highest possible sugar levels for fermentation. These carefully cultivated apples are most often picked by hand, ensuring precision and minimizing unnecessary damage. But why is avoiding bruising so critical in cider apples? Stick around, and we'll reveal the key reason behind this careful handling. In large-scale productions, mechanical shakers and sweepers are used. This is to make the whole process more efficient. But how is this done differently to hand-picking? Mechanical shakers attach themselves to trees and then shake them vigorously so that all ripe apples simply fall down into the collection bins that are set below the trees or in the machine itself. especially in acre-long orchards where hand-picking would be both expensive and time-taking. However, there's a key difference from apples picked for eating. The apples used for apple cider can even be bruised, while ones for eating are carefully ensured to never be. This is because these bruised apples used in cider will be processed immediately to avoid rot, while the eating ones will have to be stored away. Apples should ideally be always pressed soon after harvesting. Natural deterioration and even microbial growth can reduce the flavor drastically, which is why many cider mills press apples immediately after. Once the apples are picked, they briefly get stored in temperature-controlled barns or storage facilities to make sure they stay fresh. However, there are exceptions, like the commercial-grade cider producers. They use temperature-controlled atmosphere storage rooms, when oxygen levels are reduced to dwindling amounts and the CO2 levels are carefully monitored. Here, temperatures are kept near 0 to 1 degrees Celsius, and while it may seem overkill, it helps extend the life of the apples by around 6 to 12 months. But did you know the crazy part? 1 bushel of apples yields about 3 gallons of cider? Apple cider isn't just made from any type of apple, no. Eating apples like Galal, Fuji, or Honeycrisp that you get at supermarkets are bred for sweetness and crunch. But cider doesn't need that. Specific types of apples are used for each type, with a mixture usually being used to get the complex taste needed for this refreshing drink. Sweet apples are added in for a fermentable sugar in the sweet apples converted into alcohol, while the acidic ones offer the much-needed sharpness and tartness, so the cider doesn't end up tasting flat. That's not all though. Bitter or tannic apples are also occasionally added, and if you're wondering why, it's done to bring out the more traditional flavors in traditional French and English ciders, which are deeply necessary. Once the apples are ready to be used, they get transported over to the processing facilities, where they get washed in large water baths with a mix of high-pressure sprays. A small inspection process takes place, and the rotten or moldy apples get discarded to avoid contaminating the batch. Once squeaky clean, the apples get sorted into batches on the basis of quality, bruising, and overall size and appearance, with only the best making it forward in the process. They have specific industrial machines, like rollers and air blowers, that use weight and automated inspection to ensure this. After the inspection process, the apples are loaded onto conveyor belts and transported over to the grinding station. Here, the apples are ground into a fine grain pulp with specialized hammer mills, graying mills, or still even traditional stone mills. The different equipment depends on the scale of the farms, with some still preferring older methods like stone mills due to their specific taste in the product. Even if they take much longer than modern machinery, the final pulp is known as pomace. So why is this done? The main purpose is to break down the fruit and its individual cell membranes and walls down to release the juice during the pressing. So while it may not look more appetizing than some plain old baby food, it's the sole reason for the cider having the maximum packed nutrients and flavors of its apple form. The pomace now gets spread onto either cloths or mesh racks. These in turn get layered and stacked upon one another until they get transported to the hydraulic press. The press finish what the grinders started, squeezing the last bits of the juice out of the pomace itself now. Did you know that modern versions of the hydraulic presses can even extract thousands of liters of juice per hour? It's no joke. The delicious, cloudy juice is collected underneath the hydraulic press in huge stainless steel vats or even wooden casks for more traditional juiceries. Now you would assume that all of the pulp would be converted to fruit juice, but you'd be wrong. The juice yield is roughly below 70 to 80% of the weight of the apples, even in ideal conditions. To improve the juice yield and clarity enzymes are also used, with the more common one like pectinases and hemicellulases being used to break down the pectic substances in the pulp to help release the juices more easily. Now, here's where the paths may diverge a little. When it comes to sweet apple cider, the juice may be left cloudy or even clarified depending on the manufacturer. Keeping it cloudy is the more traditional style, so it definitely depends. Large chunks of apple and sediment are usually already removed, but any that pass through are removed by settling tanks, filtration, or even centrifuges, depending on what is more easier at the time and the protocols per processing plant. Though just because the juice has been filtered doesn't mean it's ready to be shipped off yet. There's still a lot more to do, especially pasteurization. Here, it gets heated to approximately 160 degrees Fahrenheit briefly to kill them off. This ensures that producers kill bacteria and extend the shelf life of their cider, as harmful pathogens may grow if this step is skipped, spoiling the whole batch. Now, after filtration, the juice is bottled directly and sent off to be created in the first of two types of cider we mentioned earlier, sweet cider. The sweet cider can also be spiced with cloves and cinnamon to add that greater depth and flavor. Sometimes it may even be blended with other fruits. Once the blending is done and the cider is made, it gets packaged in plastic jugs or glass bottles, ready to be distributed fresh. The other apple cider form, hard cider, takes a different turn. After the juicing process, instead of getting bottled right away, the juice is transferred to fermentation tanks. Here, large pre-measured amounts of yeast are added to the mixture, which feed on the natural apple sugars and turn them into alcohol and carbon dioxide gas. The yeast species used often is either the common lab-grown one, or in special occasions, even wild yeast. This isn't a step that happens all the time, though. Some cider makers let spontaneous fermentation happen instead, where the naturally occurring yeast on the apple's skin kickstarts the fermentation process. This process takes anywhere from a few weeks to even months, depending on the final outcome needed. But there's a very important aspect to making sure the fermentation takes place without any hiccups: temperature control. The ideal range for fermentation usually lies between 15 to 18 degrees Celsius for flavor development. However, the temperature can be increased for more thick yeast species. The yeast juice mixture is usually kept in controlled stainless steel tanks to keep the fermentation stable and going. Once the process is complete, the cider may be kept still flat or carbonated, which means more on the sparkling side. There's other classifications as well, keeping it dry, which means less sugar or sweet. All this happens in the tanks and barrels until the cider has been completely matured. After the maturing has taken place, barcodes and batch dates are added to each bottle before they finally all get packaged in boxes to get ready to be shipped off. To think that the humble apple has transformed from a blossom on a branch to a glass of golden cider on your patio. It's a process that's rooted in history, culture, and a lot of delicious twists. So the next time you take that long, refreshing sip, remember it's a meticulous process. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so that we can continue making these. And as always, thank you for watching. Whole process. When you pour out a glass of fresh, purple-hued grape juice, it's easy to think it's just pressed fruit, but behind that deep purple color lies a careful and scientific process. It all begins in vineyards around the world, where grapes get specifically grown for juice processing, not winemaking. Picture rows of sunlit vineyards stretching across rolling hills, with each grape ripening under the warm glow of a late summer. What seems simple on your breakfast table goes through multiple reforms to become the drink many adore. Today at Whole Process, we're going behind the scenes to uncover the mystery behind every delicious sip making up this juice. If you enjoy these videos, don't forget to subscribe and like so that we can continue making more of these. But first, how are these grapes grown? Growers monitor grape development through the summer. Samples are taken periodically to measure their sugar levels. Because of this reason, harvest timings are of key consequence to this entire affair. Grapes get harvested at optimum maturity, typically when soluble solids reach 16 to 20 Brix. This is the balance at which sweetness and acidity yield a full-bodied, fresh juice. Sugar level, acidity, and color are tested on site using handheld refractometers and even titration kits. Though the methods of harvesting tend to diversify depending on the type of vineyards, many modern-day ones focus on juice processing, having fully mechanized grape harvesters to dull the load. They work by attaching themselves at the base of each grapevine and then using large amounts of force to shake the fruit off of these vines into the bins. The positives of this method are numerous. It helps cut down on costs of hiring labor to do the task slowly by hand. In fact, the biggest plus point in the promptness, the grapes can be picked at any time of the day and night and take much less time. However, there are many advantages to manual grape picking too. Manual labor helps lessen the damage to the grapes themselves, preventing them from getting bruised from the rigorous shaking of the mechanical harvesters. Once picked, the grapes must be processed quickly. Natural yeast on grape skins begin fermentation within hours if temperatures exceed 20 degrees Celsius. For this exact reason, the loads are transported almost immediately, typically with a short time span of 2 to 6 hours to nearby facilities. At reception, each truckload is weighed, inspected, and even sampled to check the freshness of each grape. Samples are then tested for soluble solids, pH, and even the presence of mold or decay. Any fruit that shows spoilage gets immediately tossed to prevent the whole batch getting contaminated later on. Once this is done, the grapes get unloaded into large receiving hoppers that funnel the fruit onto conveyor belts for sorting and even cleaning with water. The operators remove leaves, stems, and any damaged grapes. In fact, with the technological advancements in this day and age, many plants employ optical sitters with high-speed cameras and near-infrared sensors that automatically detect color and shape defects. Depending on the facilities, some may even have metal detectors to warn of any metallic debris that may have fallen in the load previously. But that's not all. Many have also started integrating air-jet rejection systems that blow off any unwanted materials from the belts without the use of manual handling. But how do they get rid of those pesky grape stems? The clean grapes actually pass through a destemer, which is essentially a rotating drum, which works to strip the berries from their stems. The stems get discarded because they impart bitter, tannic flavors and increase the solid load in later stages. The journey never seems to end because then the separated berries fall onto another conveyor, heading to the washing units. The reason for these multiple washings is because it's vital for removing the soil and pesticide residues from the grapes. But that's not quite enough to remove any microorganisms, so chlorinated or even ozonated sprays come into play. These are used to effectively destroy bacteria, yeasts, and even molds on the grape surfaces. After washing, the cleaned fruit is inspected visually before entering the crushing section. The crushing stage is the fun part. The goal is to rupture the grape skins and release the juice by separating the liquids and solids. The grapes get fed into roller crushers or even screw crushers that gently break the skins, leaving an output of a mixture of juice, pulp, skins, and seeds. This is called a must. Temperature during the crushing process is controlled around 15 to 20 degrees to limit oxidation and enzyme activity. To hike up the food safety standards, another notch, stainless steel contact surfaces are used throughout to prevent metallic contamination. There's also another interesting step that takes place right afterward. Many juice manufacturers treat the must with pectinase enzymes derived from food-grade microorganisms. Pectinase breaks down pectin, a natural carbohydrate in grape cell walls that causes haze and traps juice within the pulp. So why is this so great? It increases juice yield by 5 to 10%, shortens pressing time, and improves clarity and filterability in later stages. The amount and contact time are carefully controlled and approved under international food enzyme regulations. After all this enzyme action, the must gets transferred to presses for juice extraction, and two main types of methods are used. The first of these is a membrane press, closed systems that inflate an internal rubber membrane to squeeze the juice gently from the must. This method produces a high-quality, low-solid juice, which is ideal for premium products. The other method is the use of belt presses, continuous systems that move the must between porous belts under increasing pressure, designed for high-volume industrial output. The pressing parameters are adjusted according to the type of grape, with typical cycles lasting 30 to 60 minutes. Juice flows into stainless steel collection tanks, while the remaining solid residue, the press cake, is taken away for secondary uses like animal feed. But did you know that from 1 metric ton of fresh grapes, processors obtain about 650 to 750 liters of raw juice? The remaining pomace, like skins, pulp, and even seeds, is set aside for other uses. For example, in case of the seeds, they may be dried and pressed for grapeseed oil extraction, and the skins and pulp can be used for animal feed and even composting. Immediately after the pressing is done, the raw grape juice produced is actually very cloudy and even has suspended solids along with yeast cells. Because the juice at this stage is considered biologically active, it quickly gets moved over to the next stages, clarification and pasteurization, all to stabilize it before it can get spoiled. The first step to getting that sanitary and delicious juice is clarification. The first clarification is mechanical. The juice passes through rotary screens or decanter centrifuges to remove large particles such as skin fragments and seed pieces. This is done until the major particles are removed, but even though it's gone through its first filtration, that doesn't mean it's clear. In fact, many fine particles are still left in suspension. To remove these, clarifying agents are added. The most common agents used are gelatin and silica sol. What these agents do is essentially bind to proteins, phenolic compounds, and other haze-forming substances. The treated juice is then stored into stainless steel settling tanks for 12 to 24 hours at around 4 degrees Celsius. But why is this colder temperature preferred over warmer ones like room temperature? The clever reasoning behind that is to slow down microbial growth. Over time, a dense sediment settles at the bottom, which simply gets siphoned or decanted out from the top. In larger factories, powerful disc stack centrifuges are ized to speed up this whole process. These can clear the juive in minutes instead of hours. The juice gets filtered again, often through the use of a fine natural powder called diatomaceous earth, or even with a membrane filter with very fine holes. These filters remove any last bits of haze and microorganisms, leaving behind a clear and bright juice. Most commercial grape juice at this stage has almost no visible cloudiness, thanks to these million steps. They all may have seemed unimportant, but the end product proves otherwise. But once the juice is clean, it's not all over. The air still needs to be removed from it. This is done because air is a mixture of a multitude of games including oxygen, and oxygen can cause juice to spoil faster. In order to increase its shelf life, producers use a process called de-aeration. The steps used to do this include firstly using a vacuum system to suck all the air out. This removes over 90% of the oxygen and helps us keep those colors, flavors, and nutrients for longer. Now that the air is removed, there needs to be another gas there to prevent it from entering incognito the packing. This is why factories fill these tanks to the brim with nitrogen gas. Nitrogen is actually completely harmless and doesn't react with any component of the juice, which is why it's often used in food production when it comes to the sealing part. But that's not the only thing that can make the fresh juice spoil. Fresh grape juice can also spoil easily because it contains some leftover bacteria. This is why pasteurization plays one of the most significant roles here. Pasteurization kills harmful microorganisms in a controlled environment. How this happens is that juice is pumped through a heat exchanger system, which is actually a set of metal plates that quickly heat and then cool the liquid. It's heated to a high temperature, but only for 15 to 30 seconds at best. Then it gets immediately cooled down. This ensures that the high temperatures don't completely spoil the drink either. The heating equipment has strict heating controls and temperature sensors to make sure that the juice reaches the correct temperature. Once all this is done, the juice is ready to be bottled and sent on its trip across the country. But before that can happen, samples need to be taken. This is done to make sure that only the best batch is being set out and also to catch any food safety issues in advance. But once everything is cleared up, the juice is finally ready to be packaged. It gets pumped in sterilized bottles, cartons, or cans using aseptic filling machines, which prevent any bacteria or air from entering. Once sealed, they get labeled with the manufacturer's information and date coded, ready to be boxed up in cardboard cartons along with other juice boxes, from where they will be sent over to your local grocery store. So next time you open your fridge to grab a cool and tangy glass of grape juice, you'll remember the effort put into creating just one carton of this drink. What looks like a simple juice box is actually the product of months of technological and manual labor. Every sip of this grape juice represents the months of cultivation and countless checks. Do you like grape juice? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.